From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. This is episode 545. I'm Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. Joining me as always, my co-host Derek, DP3 in the forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, NBA 2K25 is out now, so our agenda this week is probably going to be pretty obvious to everybody. With that being said, please, tip us off.
Yeah, so this episode is all about NBA 2K25 first impressions. First, Andrew and I will break down our pros and cons, with the primary focus being on gameplay. This will be followed up by opening our NLSC mailbag, where we asked the community how they were feeling about the gameplay. So, Andrew, as of recording this episode, I have spent about 25 hours and 4 days on the game, according to Steam. That is over 6 hours per day, and it's all gameplay. I haven't done any modding, any real editing, etc. I have uploaded 4 gameplay videos to our NLSC YouTube channel. The sessions are a combination of me versus the computer, me versus another human locally, and you and I versus the CPU co-op. So it's safe to say that I have spent enough time on the virtual hardwood to give a detailed and honest first impression, and I believe that you've been able to spend a little bit of time with the game as well, so I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, we've both been spending time with the game, and not to give everything away in the first 5 minutes of the show, but I think we're both feeling better about 2K25 than 2K24.
Our session today on 2K25, where we used the Nuggets versus the CPU Kings, was far more fun than the first session that we had on NBA 2K24 after it was initially released.
Easily.
And by a lot. And I think that bodes well for this title. And you'll hear some of those pros later in the show when we start to break down our likes and dislikes. Also, Andrew, before I get into my first impressions, I want to make a quick, very important point. I will have praise for this game, but we'll also have critiques. But there should be no, quote, he is critiquing it because he is bad at the game, end quote. As stated prior, I have uploaded many gameplay videos to the NLSC YouTube, and I have not received one negative comment as it relates to my gameplay. In fact, it's the opposite. At the risk of sounding like I'm tooting my own horn, here are some of the comments about my gameplay. These are some of the comments on my Celtics versus CPU Knicks video, which has over 11,000 views and 85 likes. And Andrew, this was the first full game I had ever played on NBA 2K25. One user states, finally a gameplay showcase where the user actually knows how to play 2K. This was the most popular comment. The next comment, I love the way you play because you make the movements of the players realistic as possible. Followed by, damn, this is the best gameplay 2K ever had by far. Just super sad that old gen got no love. And then nice video sim gameplay. So the reason why this is important is, remember on our last show where I discussed how poor the early gameplay footage looked? How most of the people on the sticks didn't seem to know how to play, and it was poor marketing for the game. As a result, their gameplay also had me incredibly worried about how the game would feel on the sticks. The majority of the comments on their videos were not positive. Dazar, a developer for 2K, made a tweet stating that the gameplay that came from Community Day was an early build that lacked final polish, because he was, in his own way, trying to stick up for the game and those who were showing the footage of it. That is my opinion on his statement. Both you and I know that this is not the reason the gameplay looked rough, because the, quote, final polish, end quote, of a game would not be completely overhauled, and there would be no significant edits to the game's engine and overall gameplay in just a couple weeks.
Exactly.
Right? That's not the way game development works.
That's a lot of changes to make to underlying tech, to an engine in 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. No.
It doesn't make sense. But I will say this, that I do understand what he was trying to do, and it's admirable that he tried to stick his neck out there for those creators. Also, many of those creators have been uploading footage since the game was released, and I'm seeing the same issues with their gameplay, right?
And yeah, we've talked about that issue before, mentioned it on the show recently, obviously, and that is great feedback on your videos. They've turned out fantastic. Obviously, I've been playing the game myself to get my own hands-on impressions, and I'll also throw out a disclaimer that these are our first impressions. We do stand by them as of today, obviously, and they are subject to change as we continue to experience the game, as any patches come through that may alter the game, and that is why we like to keep playing the game throughout the year, Derek, and sharing our impressions and noting how they've changed. And we will say, if indeed they do change and continue to develop throughout the year, as I'm sure they will to some extent, whether they are more positive or more negative or more of the same in the future, we will explain why.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll hear those thoughts on the NLSC podcast. If they put through a patch that messes with the gameplay or makes us feel differently, whether it be in a positive way or a negative way. So, yeah, totally agreed there. So, Andrew, one more important point before we start going over pros and cons. I am a firm believer that the people who make these games look the best, and in turn, the game can also feel the best in their hands, are those who actually understand basketball. This goes for if you are playing online or with NBA teams versus the CPU versus another human, etc. Because if you don't know hoop well, you are not going to understand how basketball players move, how moves are properly executed, how to properly execute in general on the floor. I think that there are game issues that make the action look blah sometimes, but after getting my hands on the sticks, I think that the number one reason why that footage looked so poor and why it was criticized so much is because the people on the sticks were often just content creators who didn't spend a lot of time with these games, or didn't know basketball well, or it was a combo of both. You jumped on the sticks with me today on NBA 2K25, and I think you can let our audience know that I know what I'm doing on this game. I understand basketball moves, how athletes should be moving and do move on the floor. And that's just a very important point, because I think during preview season, they need to get more people on the sticks that understand basketball and maybe even have some experience with the 2K series.
More hardcore hoop heads, you would say?
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you added that to the intro of the NLSC podcast, because that couldn't be more accurate when it comes to us. We live and breathe basketball.
And I don't want to be snobby and elitist myself here, but a lot of content creators are my-career gamers, or they are park players, and that is a specific style that if you only play those modes, if you're then thrown into regular 5v5 unlocked gameplay where NBA strategy is more important, where you are controlling the entire team, then you're not going to play that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing is that the game needs to appeal to those who have very little experience with basketball, people who are fair weather basketball fans, and to appeal to the veterans, right?
Absolutely.
People who know hoop, etc. And I understand from a development perspective and from a suit perspective, when you're talking about the design of the game, that is something that's really tough to balance, right? So I feel for the creators of this game in relation to that. I'm going to get into it a little bit later. I don't think that this game is great for newcomers, and you'll hear why. But I will say that overall, my impressions with NBA 2K25 are far stronger than they were for 2K24.
Same, and to that point, the user base has gotten so big now that it has got that big casual user base, and I don't use casual in the usual pejorative sense that a lot of hardcore gamers do. It's just a fact of life that as it has become the only game on the market, incredibly popular, and has become really tied into pop culture and NBA culture, it is the game, the NBA sim game, then you do have this wider user base that isn't necessarily the geeky sim gamers, I also use that term with affection as well, that were into these games all those years ago. It has expanded, it's selling more copies than ever, so yeah, you do have to appeal to a lot of newcomers as well as the veterans.
Yeah, and this is very important to point out. With my comments earlier, it's not trying to be elitist. It's talking about how they can better market their game.
Of course.
Right? You saw the comments on that early game, on those early gameplay videos, Andrew. Everybody was like, what the hell? Like, the majority of people were like, this looks poor. This guy on the sticks doesn't know what he's doing. They need to get different people on the sticks, etc. Like, they need to do a better job pre-release with their marketing. And that's one of the ways they can do it. They can get more experienced people on the sticks, more people that know basketball, etc. I think that this, like I stated, this game does need to be welcoming to all types of users. So, Andrew, I'll start with my first impressions, and we're going to start with the pros. So we're going to start with some positives here. This game, visually, is the best PS5 Gen 2K we have received. The graphics pop. The arenas are beautiful. The lighting makes sense. The close-ups on the players, the way the light and shadows hit them, all of it looks awesome. I love the way the graphics look on cutscenes, on highlights after plays, on halftime highlights, post-game highlights, etc. The smooth 60 FPS on PC for these highlights looks amazing and rocks. So yes, visually, Andrew, I love this game.
And people are finally getting to experience that on PC. Obviously, a lot of excitement in the community about that.
Yeah, and I think that this game doesn't even need to have mods that enhance the visual experience. I think the game looks that good. Obviously, there will be modders out there that are going to try to do like enhancements to the sweat and progressive sweat, maybe try different reshades. I've already seen a couple of reshades released on the NLSC, but I just think the game, from a visual perspective, rocks. I just think it looks really good. 2, the customized HUD option, where we can remove the shot meter, the player indicator, the shot feedback, and other visual cues, is so helpful. It's also great that this is part of not only the main menu options, but also your in-game menu options. The only issues I have with this is that there is still no way to remove the alley-oop meter, and these settings always reset on player 2's controller. They reset every single time player 2 starts a new session on the game. 3, pro play. I see the vision, Andrew, and I love it. I've been executing the pro play moves with Tatum, Jamal Murray, Jokic, Curry, and others, and it really does add authenticity to this game. I feel like this feature was executed incredibly well by the development team. You saw me using it many times during our Nuggets versus Kings session. I think that the animations play out smooth, and pro play in combination with the signature size ups, we have a lot of authenticity in NBA 2K25. And remember, during our last podcast, when we were talking about the early gameplay footage that was shown from people either that were at Community Day or just, were allowed to play the game early, etc., I stated I couldn't really see it, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see the benefits of pro play yet, and that's because they weren't using it properly. Right? They weren't using it well, and they weren't using it properly, at least most of them. There were a couple creators that were doing a good job with it. But now that I've gotten my hands on the sticks and I'm executing the pro play moves and seeing it in action and feeling it, yeah, I love pro play. And I'm looking forward to what they can do with that in future releases as well.
Again, speaks to the importance of the people on the sticks knowing basketball, knowing the mechanics and basketball gaming to give the game the best showing possible. And yeah, I was skeptical of pro play as well. Certainly in 2K24, the first year of it, you could see the benefits here and there. It was obviously the first year. There are always going to be teething problems with that technology. We've seen that with so many new technologies over the years, and we were skeptical. I'll certainly put up my hand a bit to being skeptical here, but so far so good.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't really notice much of it in NBA 2K24, but now it's, fully implemented, it seems, in NBA 2K25, and I absolutely love it. So the next pro is the game's menu system. It's easy to navigate, it's well laid out, and we have access to everything right out of the gate, Andrew, for offline content, meaning we have My NBA Eras rosters easily accessible and editable on release, and that is super helpful. The next pro, photo moments, which is similar to what we used to have in games like NBA 2K10, the press book. The thumbnail possibilities with photo moments are amazing. I've already used it for several thumbnails that I've used on NLSC YouTube content as it relates to NBA 2K25. I think it's a great touch. I think it's a great way to look back on the action, and you just have so many options at your disposal as it relates to replays and screenshots and whatnot. I think they knocked it out of the park with photo moments.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked before how much we appreciate the press book, as short-lived as it was. 2K10, 2K11, 2K12 from memory. Just 3 games there. A very short-lived feature, despite having a lot of benefits. And that is there in NBA gameplay, obviously. But I'm guessing it's not there in Park gameplay and Prime and Rec, etc. And it would be really useful there, because obviously you can't stop and go into instant replay in those modes and get the angles and get those great thumbnails. Obviously a lot of content creators are also online gamers, so I think if it's not there already, I will check that out. I'm guessing it's not, though. If it's not there, it also needs to be there as well.
Yeah, I think that should be implemented in any gameplay mode.
Yeah.
I think that it's possible that the developers could do this, and I think that people would use it in the modes that you mentioned where it is not. So the WNBA side of the game, sure, it needs some tuning as it relates to ratings, missing faces like Lexi Hull for the Fever, Cardoso for the Sky, etc. But man, this mode often plays better than the NBA side. I used Caitlin Clark and the Fever versus Diana Taurasi and the Mercury, and I had a blast. That video is up on the NLSC YouTube. My brothers and I also did a fantasy draft and played on the same team, and we had a good time. I feel like they really did put a lot of love and attention into the WNBA side of things overall. And sometimes the gameplay is just better. Like I stated, I think that it can look a little bit less crazy. I think part of the reason of that is when you're trying to play incredibly fast and you're trying to use explosive athletes, trying to get to the rim to throw it down, that oftentimes on the NBA side, the game can look messy because of the game's core player movement and gameplay engine. But when you're playing the WNBA side of the game, some of those frustrations are alleviated because you're not trying to use those players that way. I think that sometimes the shooting forms on the WNBA side feel better. I feel like sometimes it's easier to master the shooting. I think that even something as simple as moving the ball can feel better on the WNBA side, etc. So yeah, I'm enjoying the WNBA side of the game, and my brothers and I are going to be spending a lot more time on that.
Just goes to show the value of having that WNBA content in the game as well. There was always talk of a WNBA spin-off of Live and then later 2K back in the day. And is the league, even with its growing popularity, popular enough to support its own standalone title? Probably not, I would say. But this is a way to get the WNBA onto the virtual hardwood. And that's a very interesting point that you bring up, that look, we love dunks, obviously, and you look at the NLSC Top 10 Plays of the Week that you put together each and every week for going on 4 years now, I believe, or over 4 years, that we love dunks, and that's awesome. But that also drives you towards trying to dunk as often as possible. So you do get those moments of not necessarily picking the right drive.
Yeah, and I just think that the game, when you try to play it fast, and you'll hear it when I get into the cons, when you try to play this game fast, like real basketball is played, it can just look super messy and out of control sometimes. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues with the motion system, especially since NBA 2K20, when they revamped the already kind of troublesome 2K18 motion system. So Andrew, another pro is the player court size ratio. Players are now smaller and the court is bigger, making it so there is more room to operate and makes things feel less congested and allows for more realistic basketball action. The next pro is dribbling for advanced players in the half court. I think there are a lot of options at our disposal: size ups, hesitations, in and outs, quick crossovers, wide crossovers, quick spin moves with the dribble off of a defender's body, etc. Also, I appreciate how impactful the use of the left stick is with dribbles this year. It gives us more options and allows us to be more shifty. I will say, Andrew, that dribbling also hits the cons section for different reasons. But yeah, those are my pros.
And of course, we want to give that balanced impression of the game, pros and cons. So even within certain categories, we do have likes and dislikes, obviously. And we made a point of mentioning that during the previous season when they showed that the court-to-player ratio had changed, that we liked it. And I have seen some people say that the players are too small, but I would respectfully disagree.
Yeah, I think it helps with spacing. I think it helps with driving to the hoop. I think it helps with running the fast break. I think it is a win-win in general. So I also want to point out, too, that my cons list, yes, there are quite a few items on it, but I am enjoying NBA 2K25 more than NBA 2K24. I'm sinking a lot of hours into it right now. And last night, we played a few hours of the WNBA, and we had an absolute blast. So I think that they've moved in the right direction in many ways, including in a big way related to authenticity with their full integration this year of pro play, etc. Those are my pros for NBA 2K25. What about you?
Well, I would certainly co-sign those pros, and I have noticed that nice little animations, a lot of nice little layup animations this year, Derek.
Yeah, I had a couple on our session with the Nuggets with Jamal Murray where it was like, hey, I've never seen that one before.
Yeah.
A couple finishes on contact. I actually had a really nice finish on contact with Jokic right at the end of the game, which helped to seal it. That was new to me, and it looked smooth, and it didn't feel terrible.
And that goes back to your point about pro play. Absolutely. I think the biggest pro for me is that, well, I enjoyed the game. Well, that when I first put the game on, with all of my skepticism from the previous season and the last few NBA 2Ks, basically a generation of NBA 2Ks at this point, from that very first session, and, well, that was marred by the fact that it crashed my PS5. I'm still troubleshooting that. Other people are having similar problems. I had problems with 2K24 last year. Apparently, Derek, if you have your PS5 vertical, that can cause some issues with 2K and overheating, and I wasn't aware of that. I do need to shuffle a few things around with my console setup to do that, but I will certainly give it a try. But of course, I do have the PC version as well, which is the new gen port, so that's where I've been playing it so far. Just as a sidebar here, has been working quite well on my mid-tier gaming machine. I don't have it maxed out as you do, but still looks pretty damn good, I would have to say, and the performance has been fantastic. Even in installing it on a HDD, haven't moved it to my SSD yet. We were talking about that before release, whether it was going to need it as the requirements initially suggested. It doesn't need to be on an SSD. It will perform better, load faster on an SSD, obviously, but it isn't necessary. So if you are concerned about that, I can confirm that it can be installed to the old HDD and work just fine. But from the very start, I enjoyed my time on the sticks, and it left me with the impression that I can enjoy this game. That will be possible for me to enjoy the game this year. I can maybe mess with some sliders to try and enhance the experience even more, because I'm probably not going to be playing my career this year. We'll be dealing with my team, of course, and you do have to take what you're given there. But yeah, I felt optimistic from my very first session that I can enjoy this game. I was intrigued. I wanted to play more, and that is a big step up from 2K23 and 2K24.
Yeah, and I also want to add that one of my pros is how this game was optimized for PC. I'm seeing very few complaints related to people not being able to, get this game to work on PC or work well on PC. I'm seeing that people with, kind of budget builds being able to run this game on low and or medium.
Steam Deck too.
This game still looks awesome on low or medium. It's not like back in the day when you would put like NBA Live 2003 on low and there goes the crowd, right? Now there's pictures of your bench players. They're not even animated anymore. They're just pixels of bench players.
Hello, pixels.
And yeah, exactly. And then the lighting is destroyed, and then it's like, man, I don't want to play this. This game looks great on low and medium, and I just want to give a hint to the PC player base. If you turn, and now I usually keep my shader detail on max because my PC can handle it, but if you turn your shader detail to medium in your video settings, it still looks amazing, but that might alleviate any stuttering issues that you have. From what I was doing, testing things out, etc., I think that the shader detail has the biggest impact on FPS overall. And if you lower that, you can still get, the game is still going to look great, but you might be able to get rid of those stuttering issues. So you set it on medium for default on your rig, right? And then you were like, well, the crowd isn't full now because it doesn't give you a full crowd when you have it on default medium. You could probably turn your crowd setting to high and then have a full crowd and just keep your shader setting on medium, and it would probably work buttery smooth. 60 FPS.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to try next, is playing around with those settings and seeing just how much I can get out of my PC. But I've just been focusing on the game itself. And again, it has been a pretty strong first impression compared to 2K23 and 2K24. I don't mean to damn it with faint praise by saying that, because I wasn't as big a fan of 2K23 and 2K24. I mean, some of the issues are there, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the cons of the game, but they weren't barriers to enjoying the game. So I think that's the overarching thing for me as far as being a pro and having a positive first impression of 2K25, Derek, is that none of the issues left me so frustrated that I thought, oh, I can't play this game. This is going to be another year where it is definitely on the shelf after 2 weeks.
Right, they weren't game-breaking for you.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
Yeah, Andrew, this cons list is going to sound kind of familiar because so many of the issues that have plagued the game since the change to the new motion system are still here to varying degrees.
Yeah, of course, there are some legacy issues, and we didn't expect all of them to be resolved within the space of a year, although some of them have been there for quite a few years.
Yeah, I think these player movement issues have really shown their face and been a big issue since NBA 2K20. And unfortunately, the main issues related to that player movement are still very much in the game, but like I stated, to varying degrees. So, number one, Andrew, sliding and skating. They touted new foot planning tech this year, stating the ability to make quick stops was improved. This does not appear to be the case, and I have seen countless comments and long threads related to people's frustrations with the constant sliding. It impacts gameplay in a big way. It impacts outcomes on the court. I've seen many comments related to it feeling like people are playing on a hockey rink. This looks and feels the worst if you are trying to play fast, like real basketball often is, and it rears its ugly head in a big way online. The online footage often looks ridiculous as a result.
No, I've definitely noticed that, and as we've said before, the sliding, the skating, it's not just a cosmetic issue. It moves players out of position, it interrupts the way the CPU detects foot planting on defense, and to that point, shot contest systems. It's all affected by the way players move on the court. So it's not just, the players are sliding a little bit, they're not connecting completely with the floor, you're making too much out of it from a cosmetic point of view. It affects gameplay.
It's the feel.
Yeah.
Right. And the feel is so important. And it impacts you trying to, make a first step and stop on a dime and score. It affects, where you stop on the floor on the fast break to, change directions or make a pass. It impacts so many different things. It impacts, how fast you get out to a shooter and the control that you have when moving your feet on defense. So, and oftentimes it's not even sliding, it's floating, right? And, if you go into the replay, the players are kind of floating above the court sometimes. So, it's still a major issue in NBA 2K25. The next item I have is the suction. This is the worst on Superstar and Hall of Fame by far, where the game is virtually unplayable at times as a result. I will say that on Superstar, it is more manageable, especially if you play a controlled half-court game. But Hall of Fame is, in my opinion, just unplayable with all the suction that takes place on that difficulty level, constantly getting sucked into defenders, you as the defender getting sucked into offensive players. Oftentimes, contact isn't even being made by the players that are getting stuck. It's an invisible barrier, like a force field. However, while this is the worst on Superstar and Hall of Fame, it is constant, and as a result, incredibly frustrating when using non-stars on all difficulty levels. If you have a player that has an average or below handle, or is average or below speed or quickness, you feel like you can't get anywhere. You are constantly being bumped and sucked into players all over the court. This heavily impacts the My Team experience, as so many of the players, especially retro players, are so undermade, Andrew, and made so average or below average on the floor. It makes players, even on the pro challenges, not fun or realistic to use. Where suction is also incredibly troubling is on picks and screens, where your defender is constantly sucked into the pick or screen setter, and you have no way to go over or under the screen. The sequence lasts so long that the CPU or your user opponent will get wide open threes all game just sitting behind the pick setter. This suction is super frustrating also in one-on-one situations, even with the best players on Superstar and Hall of Fame. Yeah, Andrew, this has been one of my biggest issues with the series, especially since 2K20. And, I've uploaded gameplay videos on different difficulty levels and including Superstar and whatnot. And you can see me kind of navigating that and making things happen. But that doesn't mean that it's not negatively impacting the gameplay, that it's not frustrating to deal with all game. And I think that this is also a big reason why this game isn't super welcoming to newcomers, casual players, or people just trying to play even a basic brand of basketball. It can also be super frustrating for advanced players, especially in modes like my team, right? Or when you're using underdone My NBA Errors rosters, when you're using that classic content. I've jumped into a couple games with the My NBA Errors rosters, and every game I've had has just been super underwhelming, and it has felt piss poor. And that's even on All-Star, like jumping in on like Pro and All-Star. And the reason why is just because the suction and the janky movement and the dribbling feel and all of that stuff with players that are average or underdone in general, it just makes the game feel terrible. And all of those issues really, really shine when you're using those players. So back to the suction, it's just a mess on offense and defense oftentimes.
It's been one of the most frustrating issues for years now, trying to make that explosive move, trying to turn the corner, trying to break free of the defense, and the CPU sucking you in and sticking to you like glue, and you get an average defender locking down a great ball handler and an explosive player because they are sticking to you like that. Absolutely. And it definitely is noticeable with the My NBA eras. I'd certainly agree there. And even with players that are done pretty well, MJ has pretty high ratings, obviously, as he should. But even then, I was playing a game, one of my first games with NBA 2K25, got a steal, Derek, and got out on the break and tried to go for a dunk, but got sucked backwards into a contact layup and missed it, which I wasn't anticipating. So, yeah, that is very annoying.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing on the higher difficulty levels, don't be surprised when Josh Giddey absolutely locks up Michael Jordan, and Jordan can't get a shot off in the mid-range, can't get any open looks, everything is a heavily contested shot. You're put into these slow motion side by sides with Giddey, and he's forcing you out of bounds when you try to drive baseline. Like, it's so stupid, and you're missing layups constantly because it's on real player percentage, because I think the layup timing is broken, even though you can use it as an option. And like, they set it to real player percentage by default, and you know why they did that, because in a game that they market heavily skill based, they would want layup timing to be the default. But I think that the layup timing has issues.
We've said that before.
Honestly.
We've said that before, that when they have the default settings like that, it usually is a Band-Aid fix.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a problem, and I think that it should have been ironed out by now, but unfortunately it's still there, and in there in a big way. So, Andrew, the next item is janky player movement. This motion system, especially since 2K20, has had serious issues with player movement, players jerking around the court awkwardly, making unnecessary and non-initiated hesitation movements and dribbles, and struggling to do something as simple as running up the court. More often than not, when running up the court, quote unquote, your player will go in between running, jogging, and walking before he makes it to the hoop. Players are often flinging themselves towards the hoop unnaturally on layups and dunks. There are many awkward rocket layup and rocket dunk animations. Something as simple as changing directions, Andrew, your player just kind of like struggles to do so. It doesn't look like a human trying to turn. It's very janky and robotic. Sometimes when you're turning and you have your dribble still, the player is just palming the ball, and the ball is like just stuck to his hand while he's moving his feet. I think that
the overall player movement, as far as being realistic to an athlete and a human being, etc., is just far behind what we had in the old motion system in games like 2K16 and 2K17. You didn't have as much janky movement in those motion systems. If you were running on the fast break, you would keep, the same momentum going up the court with your dribble, and you'd be pushing the ball forward as opposed to having a straight back, then hunched over, and then a straight back again, and then your speed changing, etc. I think that there's just so many janky movements on the court with the dribble and even when you don't have the ball, and I think it hurts the gameplay.
Well, that's the thing. Pro Play has obviously impacted the quality of some of the animations, but some of the transitional animations, some of the player movement, certainly the feel, trying to have that smooth movement, and then it either looks janky and also feels a bit heavy as well. I do like this better than 2K24, but it's still not quite to my taste as far as movement. I still don't enjoy it as much as earlier games. 2K14 to 2K17 still feels like the peak of play movement to me.
Yeah. Again, those issues that I just mentioned, what does that do? Also, it makes it unwelcoming for beginners, casual players, and those who like to play fast, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to keep bringing that up. I'm super skeptical about this game being good for newcomers or casual players. So the next con is dribbling for beginners, casual players, and those who want to play fast. So the combination of the player movement, suction, and dribbling mechanics make this game look and feel incredibly poor when playing fast. Dribbling does not make as much sense as it did in the old motion system when it comes to standard, basic basketball dribbling moves like crossovers, going behind the back, etc. For those who want to play fast, the dribbling can feel completely out of control and messy. The sliding when playing fast hurts the feel of the gameplay in a major way, and the suction on all difficulty levels is on full display. This is why the online footage you see often looks like a disaster. It doesn't look fun at all. How poor does that online gameplay look, Andrew? I know you watch that gameplay and be like, oh, I don't want to go in there.
Yeah, I'm not jumping online this year, I don't think. I think I'll be more frustrated than I'll have fun. I mean, I may check it out for the purposes of commenting on it and seeing what the scene is like, because I've heard conflicting things about the matchmaking this year and the quality of the play, but yeah, none of the footage has really encouraged me to get into the online scene. I think I'll be staying offline.
Yeah, and I will be.
Of course.
Touching.
It's the sensible thing to do.
Exactly. The next con is the shooting on Hall of Fame difficulty. I think that the shooting overall is functional on the other difficulty levels. But on Hall of Fame, just my recommendation is to stay away from that difficulty level at all costs. You will want to throw your controller. It is so frustrating. Not only, the fact that you can't hit a contested shot, period, right, on that level, really, but you're going to get completely wide open shots with capable shooters, and you are going to it's going to be an absolute brick fest. It's so impossible to find the optimum release point. It's been questioned online if there is an optimal release point, if it's more random than anything this year, because you can release it, or at least you feel like you release it the same twice and get entirely different results. I think that the just Hall of Fame in this game is the most unrealistic, frustrating basketball experience you can have. I think the computer sticks to you all over the court. They're so fast on defense that they're in your shorts by the time you catch the ball, even if when you first passed it to the player, he had 10 to 15 feet of space before he caught the ball. But by the time he catches it, the defender is right there. The suction is on full display. It's just blah. So my recommendation to the basketball gaming user base, stay away from Hall of Fame at all costs.
Yeah, I've noticed that with the jump shots. To your point, it does feel like you release it with that same timing on consecutive plays, and yet the results are different. So that is always frustrating when it feels like your input is correct, and yet you're getting a random result, or a very contrived result, as the case may be. And it's funny because in the courtside reports, the gameplay courtside reports, they did talk about how the difficulty levels were going to be handled this year, and imply that it was going to be more about playing smarter, being more aggressive, rather than some of the old tricks. But I think the old tricks are still there.
Yeah. Well, here's the hitch with that. If you're trying to play smart on Hall of Fame, I know what I'm doing, Andrew. You played with me. Okay.
Yeah.
Whether you're running a quick play or a sophisticated set, right? And let's say you let the play run all the way through. Let's say it's even the staggered screen, like 2 screens on the baseline. A guy frees up, you pass it to him in the corner. By the time your player catches the ball and he goes into a shot, that defender is still going to be in your shorts, right? And if he's not in your shorts completely, it will be considered a semi-contest. And the shooting mechanics are just so wildly random at times that the only way you're going to make that shot is possibly lucking into it, right? That's not fun. That's not quote unquote an ultimate challenge. It's just ridiculous.
It's not skill gap
I
either.
love the way that you're right. Yeah, it's not skill gap either. Now, I will say this too. There's been countless threads out there talking about how shooting is super frustrating in general. They're talking about how it feels in the online scene, how it feels as it relates to the animation that's playing out. And I feel for you. And, I don't go online and I don't play in that scene. But if you are having issues in the online scene with your shooting, I can kind of see why. I know that that's not like Hall of Fame shooting, right? But from everything that I hear, there's just little consistency to it overall. And the other piece of this too is that online there has been a lot of reports of lag, Andrew.
Of course.
Right? More lag than ever this year. And people glitching out, like the stuttering, huge input delay, all of that stuff. So if your shooting mechanics aren't strong to begin with, yeah, good luck, right? When you factor in that online lag, etc. So, yeah, for those struggling with shooting, I'm sorry that you're going through that.
And, of course, the usual apologist rhetoric is, oh, it's a skill issue, get good, my favorite saying, of course. And, look, obviously you do need to master those skills, master the timing, etc. But when you do have lag, when you have input lag offline, when you have even more input lag online, when you also have inconsistent tuning and mechanics like that, then you're fighting against that as well. So it's not just a matter of getting good, it's also compensating for any issues. And the more issues you have to compensate for that have nothing to do with your skill or your ability to understand the controls and the mechanics, that's not a good challenge.
Yeah, exactly. I think that if the end user is jumping into a basketball video game and they feel like they're fighting the game issues more often than not, that will never be fun, right? And that includes whether it's related to shooting, whether it's related to trying to move their feet properly on defense, whether it's the struggle of never being able to make a semi-contested shot, etc. So, I feel for those people that are playing online and struggling with the game's mechanics. Next con, Andrew, is retro content inaccuracies, which includes my NBA eras, classic teams, all-time teams, and my team. The disrespect here is so disappointing, and those who made the decision to make this content low priority should be ashamed of themselves. Players' signatures, tendencies, attributes, badges are off across the board. This heavily impacts my NBA eras and my team. I jumped into my team, Andrew, tried to play a little bit, and I was so underwhelmed I may not touch that mode this year. Even using the best players on pro and whatnot just feels so underwhelming because they're so slow and they're not made to their real life counterpart. Their ball handling is too low. You go up for a shot with them and it doesn't look like their real shot in real life. All of that stuff. Like I said, I think the people that are allowing this to be low priority every year should be ashamed of themselves. I think it's super disrespectful. I'll also point out that you and I tried to jump into my NBA eras and play a game between the Sonics and Warriors, and of course the Sonics court was incorrect. Ricky Pierce had the wrong jersey number. Sean Kemp was incredibly slow, so he had no face-up game. We were playing on All-Star too. He had no face-up game, no way to put the ball on the floor, no way to create space for his mid-range shot, all of that stuff. Players' shooting forms were wrong across the board. Dana Barros not shooting anything like himself. It was super, super underwhelming. And every single time I've gone into my NBA eras and tried to play a game, I was just left kind of pissed off, to be honest, because of the disrespect and the fact that they've just continued to allow this to be low priority all of these years. So, my team, probably not something I'm going to jump into this year, Andrew. And unless somebody, with knowledge of the game and with time to edit those rosters, unless they go in and make a great roster where it's more accurate, I might not be touching my NBA era as much this year either.
Oh, for sure. And again, an issue that's been in the game for years. Actually, we've talked about it before. It even goes back to the mid-2000s. You go back and look at the all-decade teams in NBA 2K6, for example. There's a lot of just copy and paste ratings just put in there. It kind of works. Those teams are kind of fun to play with, despite the issues, but there is definitely a lot of inaccuracies. And now that they've changed the motion system, etc., that lower speed ratings are definitely an issue. Those historical rosters are very undercooked, underdone, as you said. And yeah, it is disappointing. And at this point, we've talked about the agendas and whether it's laziness, whether it's agenda-driven, but at the end of the day, the result is the same. It just means that the rosters aren't as fun to play with. And that's unfortunate because there is a lot of content there, but it's quantity over quality, as we've said before.
Yeah, I think it's the lack of respect that bothers me just as much.
Yeah.
That's, for as a hardcore hoophead, right? As somebody who has grown up loving basketball and watching a lot of these players, from the Jordan era, the Kobe era. But yeah, so let's get into the next con because I could talk about this all day. Limited options for signature shots and just that functionality not working properly right now anyway. Apparently there's an issue where I believe it's like if you change the shot base, then the release can't be changed or something like that. Like you can't edit player signature shots right now in the game. So that's hopefully a patch will come through to fix that. But also the fact that, back when we played like NBA 2K16 and 17 and everything, you would have, release 57, release 111, release 120, all of that stuff. You'd have all of these, release options to, try to fix some of these inaccuracies in the game, or if you're adding players or creating players, be able to assign them, etc. All of these different releases and bases. But now those are all out of the game. So the only release and base options, Andrew, are player names. So they're just, shots that are already assigned to players. So we've gone backwards in a pretty big way when it comes to being able to assign signature shots to players and customize that part of the game.
It does feel like that happens every couple of games or so, that we lose some kind of flexibility or the animation packages change or something like that, something that nobody really asked for and something that was seemingly working really well is broken. And look, game development, software development does happen that way, that sometimes features need to be changed because something new doesn't work with something old or whatever, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating.
Exactly. And press steal to foul. You and I experienced this during our co-op session. These are some of the worst steal mechanics in 2K history. It actually might be the worst. When you push the steal button near the offensive player, even if you believe you've timed it right, even if you're, playing defense the proper way when you initiate that steal attempt, more often than not, you hug the offensive player or you make an aggressive attempt at the ball and it's a canned sequence and it's a foul. Playing defense on the ball in this game is super unrealistic and super frustrating. Whether the offensive player has his dribble or he's picked up his dribble, you feel like you can never actually go for a steal attempt because it's going to be a foul. And for the heck of it, I was like, hey, I'm going to turn down all the foul sliders and I'm going to see if it makes a difference. It doesn't, Andrew. I turned the foul sliders down to 25, and that includes for reach-in fouls, and it was still just a steal to foul mess. I think that they have gone backwards in a major way when it comes to steal mechanics. There is far better steal mechanics in games like NBA Live 06 for the PC, NBA 2K17, NBA 2K16, etc.
Oh, absolutely. And this remains one of our biggest pet peeves on defense, because when you do time that button press correctly, you should expect to see that steal. Or at the very least, you'll see, if it isn't well timed, you'll see the reach-in foul. If it's not well timed, you might see the miss, obviously. Or if nothing else, you see a failed steal attempt. You won't knock the ball loose. But to press the steal button just once, well timed, and to have your player just swiping really aggressively and wrapping up, hugging the ball handler, and just blatantly fouling them like that, and you're not even trying to be aggressive with it. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It feels very canned, very phony, and yeah, steals remain one of my least favorite aspects of 2K for several years now.
Yeah, and there's also the issue where you can walk right up next to the ball handler, and he'll just be dribbling in place, and you'll be swiping at the ball in order to get a steal, and your hand is like going through it, your body is going through it, like you're not able to jar that ball, even though he's just standing there and you're next to him swiping at it. And every now and then you'll get one of those steals if you luck out on it. But yeah, I mean, this is not an issue that should be in a video game that's being released in 2024, right? I think that this should have been ironed out a while ago, and I'm not sure if this is mostly because they're trying to balance it online, because a lot of people complained in a few past releases about steals being too easy, right? On-ball steals. My opinion is that this decision is mostly related to that, and of course, when they make those online adjustments, it impacts all modes, right? So, whatever the reason is, it's a terrible mechanic, and I think it's poorly done.
No, I think that's probably right. In fact, worryingly, I've already seen some posts on X saying that steals need to be nerfed because it's too easy to steal online. So it's probably not going to get any better offline.
It's not a good look, Andrew, that video games that came out almost 20 years ago have more variety in their steal animations and better functionality as it relates to making steal attempts, etc. So, yeah, just want to say that that's super frustrating. And lastly, Andrew, my team auction house being hidden behind gold rep.
Yeah.
This should be available right when you go into my team. It's a community-based initiative. The auction house is all about community. It's about sharing cards. It's about building together, all of that stuff. They made it so you can't unlock the auction house until you reach gold rep, which can take hours upon hours in order to achieve. So, I think that's unfortunate, and I don't know the reasons behind that, but I assume that it has to do with them hopefully being able to make more money. That's, when I see decisions like this, which I believe are anti-community, I think that it's more a way for them to possibly get people to put more money in the game before they unlock the auction house.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that is part of the motivation. I know that they are trying to combat some of the problems that happened with the auction house in the past, with MT resellers and things like that, and people abusing the auction house for wages and so forth. So that is commendable. I think that is something that you do need to look at, because the auction house economy was broken for a long time, although part of it also comes down to the terrible MT payouts, the horribly low MT payouts, which is also an issue this year, unfortunately. You can already see that being a problem. So I think there might be some good intentions there as far as combating that stuff, but I also think that it definitely helps them as far as making money, as you said. And even if it does have good intentions and good intentions only, I don't think it's implemented fairly. I think it is a little bit too harsh.
Yeah, that mode is just underwhelming for me in general. Like I stated this year, I think it was enjoyable for the most part in NBA 2K22. I think that was the year that I spent the most time with it outside of NBA 2K15. But yeah, I think it's kind of a mess this year. So in conclusion, Andrew, because of the issues I mentioned, my opinion is that this game is not very welcoming to newcomers. I think that the game's mechanics could easily get frustrating for anybody trying to play a fast-paced brand of basketball, which in real life, basketball often is, and the controls are not user-friendly for basic basketball moves. So, yeah, that's it. I want to say once again that I do think that NBA 2K25 is a better showing than NBA 2K24, and a big reason for that is the full integration of Pro Play. I think that when you're using the current teams, the game can sometimes shine. You've seen my gameplay videos go up on YouTube. For those who haven't, I recommend checking out all the content I'm putting up related to NBA 2K25 on the NLSC YouTube channel. You can see where they got it right as in relation to authenticity, in relation to the graphics, in relation to some of the animations, in relation to some of the likenesses, all of that stuff. But you can also see some of those legacy issues rear their ugly head. So my recommendation for the majority of the basketball gaming community is try to play this game on Pro, All-Star, or Superstar. Stay away from Hall of Fame. Stock settings work okay on those difficulty levels. If you want to make the game a little bit more reactive on the sticks and maybe pick up the pace a little bit, because there have been a lot of complaints about the game feeling a little bit slow with stock settings. You can raise the acceleration max min settings for user and computer. In the slider settings, you can change it to like 77, 37, defaults 35, 75. And you could also change things like the speed slider to 55, agility to 55, etc. You could also lower body up sensitivity to try to remove some of that suction, even though it seems more of a placebo effect this year because I don't think it's making that big of a difference. But you could change body up sensitivity to 0 or 10 or something like that. At default, it's 50. So there's ways that you can loosen up this game to make it feel a little bit better on the sticks. Another thing that you could do is change the game speed to 55. If you go on the NLSC YouTube channel and you watch the gameplay between the Warriors and Pelicans, that was user-to-user gameplay. That is with game speed at 55. So try to work with the game and get the best experience possible out of it. That's what I'm doing. We're going to be playing a ton of the WNBA this year. I'm going to be connecting on Parsec with people on the game like I did with Andrew earlier. And, I'll be uploading more gameplay videos than 2K24 by a lot. You're going to see far more videos go up for 2K25. But those are kind of my final thoughts on it. Did you have any other cons that I didn't mention?
Well, once again, I'll have to co-sign what you mentioned as cons. When it comes to suction and sliding, I've noticed a couple of weird moments where, defending on the perimeter, the players get drawn together and then slide and snap into a different position on the floor. They just slide across to where the game thinks they should be. It's only happened a couple of times. Maybe it's a little glitch that they can fix with patches once again, but it's worth pointing out.
I notice it most when you're getting sucked into picks and screens. To be honest with you, as far as what you're talking about, as far as like losing complete control of your player. And the computer uses that strategy the most in order to get shots off, both in the WNBA and NBA side of things, where they will have a screener come up and he will pick you and you'll be completely sucked into the person setting the pick. And that means that you can't get over the pick. You can't get under the pick. You're just sucked into that player. And it gives the CPU just optimum time to shoot the ball. It's a completely wide open shot for them. And even on Pro in this game, the computer just rarely misses. So the majority of the computer's makes, in my experience when playing against the CPU, is just them sitting behind screens where the defender is sucked into the pick setter and they shoot a wide open three. This also impacts, in a big way, off-ball screens, because you'll see an off-ball screen coming and you'll try to fight through it, but you're sucked into the person setting the screen, and now that shooter is completely wide open and you have no chance to get to them. There's also a lot of floaty jumping in that game as far as contesting shots. So you'll think that you have time to jump and contest a shot or like block an outside shot, but your jump with your player is kind of floaty, so he doesn't really have a chance to give a true contest.
Well, here's the thing. That is a favourite park strategy, getting people stuck on picks and just standing behind picks and firing away. So great news for park players, I suppose, but it definitely shouldn't be like that. And as we've said before, as we've said on this very episode, it's not just a matter of not looking good. It's not just a cosmetic issue with sliding and skating. it does actually impact the gameplay. It moves players out of position, it helps with getting sucked into defenders, and so forth. And while I said I enjoy the gameplay's feel more than 2K23 and 2K24, and that is true, it still feels like there's some residual heaviness. Some of the input lag is definitely there. I do want to try a couple of different controllers. Apparently the PS5 controller is actually supported natively in Windows 10 in this game this year, Derek, so I'm going to hook up my PS5 controller by USB and give that a shot, see how that feels as far as input lag as opposed to my wireless controller. So that is worth a try. There is some residual heaviness, though, some input lag. Not as bad as last year. I think that is a little bit better. There are those legacy issues. Sometimes there are moments where I do feel out of control still, and that is a bit frustrating. But I will say that I felt less frustration compared to last year. Now, we are in the honeymoon period of the release window. The first couple of weeks, as I wrote about in Monday Tip-Off last week, is the honeymoon phase where we get the most reactionary takes, positive or negative. A lot of people saying it's the best game ever. I'm not going to say that in the first 2 weeks. I'm not feeling that. I'm glad that people are enjoying the game enough to feel that way. I do think after a couple of weeks we are going to notice more of the cracks, more of the issues, more of the both legacy and new. We're going to see that. We're going to have honest conversations about that after a couple of weeks have passed. But at the same time, I can see a lot of positives out of the gate. I'm willing to work with the game, try some slighter tweaks, see how it goes, make the most of it. My team, I'm not feeling either, so as I said, I'd give it a go because I have enjoyed my team in the past and Ultimate Team. I am open to those modes despite the predatory mechanics. I go no money spent, obviously, as I know you do, so I'll continue to give that a go and see if I do warm up to it, but my initial impressions of that mode weren't as positive. Quickly jumping into a couple of games there. But Play Now games and Era's Play Now, despite the issues with the historical rosters, obviously, I did have a good time. So that is very encouraging for my early sessions with the game. First impressions, cautiously positive after being cautiously optimistic. Still notice some issues there, but no, I'll give this game a go.
Also, we know that the gambling mechanics are still there, right? And we know that you're getting those virtual currency splash screens trying to pressure you to buy.
Goes without saying, yeah.
Virtual currency, that goes without saying. We know about the issues with my team as it relates to pack odds and everything. And we just want to, state what we stated on prior shows, do whatever you possibly can to go no extra money spent with this game and to, hopefully be able to get your player up to an overall where your player is enjoyable on the court without spending extra money. So, we feel for you as it relates to those mechanics in the game. And lastly, before I get to the mailbag, I also want to state that we do know that NBA 2K25 was also released for Xbox One and PS4. However, we don't have that version at this time, and we have not played that version, so we're not going to give our impressions. My gut tells me that it's probably just incredibly similar with very few updates to NBA 2K24. But yeah, we haven't forgot about you as a player base. We don't own that version right now.
And can I just put this out there? I've seen some people, as always, shout down the prior gen gamers and say, well, what do you expect? Why are you playing that? There's about 45% of the PlayStation user base that are still on PS4. That statistic was posted fairly recently. So a lot of people are still playing PS4. It does hold up, obviously, in many ways. If it's not in your budget or you just simply don't feel inclined to upgrade, especially while games are still being released for the prior gen consoles, that is completely understandable. Now, if you're talking about expecting innovation and for it to be a priority, then certainly that is misguided, shall we say. But this is a game that is coming out full price. They are still releasing on that platform, charging full price for it. They could have given a little bit more attention during the preview season, at least mentioned it, at least given some token mentions of what was going on with PS4 and X1 during the preview season. They barely mentioned the PS4 and X1 versions last year, and the PC port obviously last year. Now we do have new gen on PC, thankfully. So that's why I thought that last year might be the last year for PS4 and X1. So I was a bit surprised to see that it was still coming out on those platforms this year. That being said, it has been released on those platforms at full price. The prior gen gamers deserved a few previews during the preview season.
Yeah, and also don't crap on people who play on prior gen, because there's a reason why they're releasing an Xbox One and PS4 version, is because there's still a lot of gamers on those systems. Okay, so there could be a number of reasons why they are still playing that version of the game, but stop crapping on the way other people play. There is no need of it, and those gamers should be respected.
Yeah, they deserve value for money. They deserve a good product, especially if it's being released at full price. There's no need for this new gen, next gen elitism. I've talked about that before in an article. It's putting even more toxicity out there into the discourse. And hey, it's not like PS1 to PS2, Derek, or Super Nintendo to PS1. The PS4 and X1 are pretty advanced consoles still. They hold up pretty well. So it's not like asking for a modern game on a really outdated console.
There's a game like Remnant from the Ashes, which is a PS4 title that looks as good or better than any PS5 title that I have seen. So yeah, PS4 and Xbox One just were incredible from a technical standpoint, visuals, gameplay, etc. Well, those are our first impressions. Let's get to the mailbag to see what their first impressions were of the gameplay.
To the mailman, the quote face. What an unbelievable dunk!
So Steven at the Live King states, I think the gameplay is good, but it's very inconsistent. I can pop in Madden and the game doesn't change. I don't get that feeling when I play 2K25. The improvements are good, but after the honeymoon phase, it feels like the old games. I do feel that the player movement especially is just very similar to NBA 2K24. And that overall, you can expect patches throughout this release that are going to switch up the gameplay on you, right? And it's going to impact all modes, more than likely. So I do see where he's coming from there, Andrew.
Oh, for sure. And consistency is king, right? I mean, you don't want to be surprised negatively. You want to know what you're getting.
Exactly. Coach Parker states, I won my first game in my Spurs dynasty. Thank goodness for the forever faithful triangle offense. So he's enjoying the game and he uses the Spurs. So congratulations to you winning your first game. T Gentry at Bucky T states, without the legacy issues, I think it could be a great game. Most annoying things are the sliding, skating, suction, janky movements, catching passes as it were a heavy weight ball, and yo-yo dribbling, etc. I like the improved rim mechanics. Shooting is better for me in 25 than 24. I can't believe I forgot to touch on that in the pros section, Andrew. The rim mechanics are so much better this year.
Yeah.
You actually get realistic bounces. There's way more variety when it comes to makes and misses. I had a shot that bounced off the front of the rim, off the backboard and in. I had a high bounce off the back of the rim that went in. There's just way more variety when it comes to ball to rim mechanics, and that was an awesome touch. So excellent job by the development team there. And yeah, obviously Bucky T agrees with the majority of my con list. Him and I look at these games very similarly.
It's most welcome, those changes to the rim mechanics, those rim interactions, for sure. And to go back to Coach Parker's point, when you win your first game, when you are a veteran player, you get on the sticks, you adjust to the new mechanics, any changes to the gameplay, and you get going, and you win that first game. It really does help that first impression of the game. It's when you have that frustrating first loss because the game just feels so foreign, so difficult in a bad way, so unbalanced compared to a previous game, that's when it leaves a bad first impression. So when you can get on the sticks, adjust to it, pick up and play because you are a veteran player, and you get that first win, it really does help that first impression.
Yeah, and how good did it feel for us to get our first win today? Yeah. It was the first time we ever connected on, via co-op on this game, and we had an awesome win using that Nuggets team.
I will say that the way they were fouling, even when the game was out of reach, kind of reminded me of Live 06 in one of my gripes with Live 06, actually. But I think they were trying to cover the spread. There's something shady going on there with those Kings.
That last minute felt like it was 15 minutes long.
When they rip on
That's
NBA
how much
games,
they were fouled.
Yeah, when they rip on NBA games for the last minute lasting 15, yeah, they kind of captured that there, actually.
Exactly. At Phil Lime 2K states, better than in 2K24 because more rim bounces, less out-of-bounds violations, and he states, I'm not sure, but is there less suction or not? Still, there is skating and bodies are sometimes a hologram. So he points out the skating and the suction. He thinks it might be less, but he can't tell, which means, yes, it's still there. Phil Lime 2K. It's still something that is causing an issue. Otherwise, you would absolutely notice that it was mostly removed or not as much of an issue anymore. Mace at King J Mace states, it's really good gameplay, an adjustment from playing current gen PC, but really solid. I just got to lock in and learn more pro play moves. And there you go. So like he understands the importance of pro play. He's probably seen it on some recent gameplay videos where it's demonstrated properly, and he understands how that's going to help him with his experience with the game in a positive way. So yeah, pro play, Andrew, that's the next comment. So at MD Doctor, so Dr. Toboggan MD, who is just an excellent cyberface maker, states, I love pro play. I'm a big fan of realism and likeness, and this is the first year where each player feels like they genuinely play different from each other. Definitely a learning curve, though. I can't shoot or defend to save my life. So yeah, pro play, big hit with the community.
And we were skeptical because last year was kind of overhyped, and at the same time we did understand that it was year one of new tech, so it wasn't necessarily going to blow us away, although sometimes new technologies have indeed been fantastic out of the gate. We've talked about right stick dribbling in 2K13 just being a slam dunk straight away. Obviously it does happen, but this is a brand new motion capture technology. It was going to have some teething problems. It was going to be a long-term project for them, and yes, I was skeptical before the game released. Now, having got my hands on the game, look, I'll raise my hand, Eric, and say I undersold it. I was putting too much stock in the pre-game footage from people who didn't necessarily know how to play the game. I should know better than that. So yeah, I'll put up my hand and say it's worked out better than I thought, and yeah, I'm delighted by that.
Yeah, I'm a believer now.
Yeah.
Next response is NC to the Bone states, it's pretty good in my opinion. I don't do any of the online stuff. I'm strictly offline and only play the offline modes, so my impression might be different than some. That is a very important point because he's staying away from the gambling issues, right? Those predatory mechanics. He's jumping into offline only, and he's not dealing with those online issues.
The meta, the cheeses, the toxic gamers. But I have noticed, Eric, that somebody posted a screenshot that apparently when you are getting blown out by 20 plus in the online team play modes this year, there is a quit without penalty forfeit option. Fantastic. That will cut down on toxicity immensely.
Pretty sure they implemented that in Madden too. So EA Sports implemented that in Madden, and it's a great move. Brother Milk states, not about gameplay, but I think they should put the Bill Russell Celtics back in the game along with more classic teams. This issue was also raised on the Discord. Bill Russell is obviously absent in NBA 2K25, and the 64-65 Celtics were ripped out of the game. I personally think that this is probably an issue they're having with Russell's estate. Maybe they didn't want him in the game. Maybe it's too soon following his death. Maybe there's been speculation on whether they didn't want his likeness in the game anymore because they didn't want 2K to make money off of him. Like that, there's no way for us to confirm that, but there's been speculation, right, related to that. So yeah, it sucks not having Bill Russell in the game because he's one of the biggest legends of the sport. But yeah, he's sorely missing.
No, that was a blow to see him absent from the game, and this has happened with players who have passed away before. I believe Moses Malone was absent for a few years there after his passing back in 2015. NBA 2K16, the last game with him for a while, and he's back in the game now. Perhaps Bill Russell will be back in the game via a roster update or as early as next year, but again, it comes down to his estate, how his family feels, and they're entitled to that. As disappointing as it may be for us, that is a human being.
They need to do what they're comfortable with, period.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dr. Ariel states, a lot harder to shoot, similar to 2K23. Computer is smarter. You've got to throw lobs, overhead passes, and bounce passes at appropriate times. Margin for error is very small. Him at Shrek 2 Fanboy states, as a basketball game, it feels incredibly realistic, and having new rim animations where the ball actually bounces and can go in is nice. How about that, Andrew? So many people touching on the new rim mechanics. It was sorely missing. It's something that we had in past titles like 2K16, 2K17, where it was so well done, and finally, good rim mechanics are back. He continues, but my lord, is it agonizing to learn this game? I was pretty good at 24, but so far I've struggled with everything in 25. Like I stated, I don't think that this game is great for newcomers. I'm skeptical about that. Albia states, and this is our last response on X, he states, not good, been the same for like 6 years now. Only 2K21 was impressive in graphics and 2K22 in atmosphere. I do agree that there are a lot of legacy issues and a lot of the gameplay does feel the same, similar to the Madden series. people's complaints about that. At the same time, I'm not in 100% agreement with the graphics. For me, this is the best graphic 2K on the PS5 gen, but that's just his opinion, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, Andrew, those are our responses on X, formerly known as Twitter.
And some good insight there. Certainly agree with a lot of those takes. And yeah, to your point, the rim interactions are a big deal. I mean, we've talked about how we've gone back and played NBA Live 96, games from the mid-90s that have had these great rim interactions, shots bouncing around, rolling in, etc. So we expect to see it in a game released in the 2020s as well.
Yeah, and there was a lot of positivity in those comments, right? More people enjoying the game than they were 2K24. And I love to see that.
And I also like that those takes, like ours, are measured. Look, if somebody does feel that this game is the best ever, they are certainly entitled to that opinion, but this is the honeymoon phase where you've got to be careful with those takes. They can be very premature. You can jump the gun on calling it the best or the worst, for that matter. So I like the positivity, and I like that it's well thought out.
Yeah, we also had a positive response on Discord. ZCB44 states, most fun I've had with a 2K since 2K20. The last few years felt like you were fighting the game itself at times to do really cool stuff. And now it's much more fluid. I could write a whole essay here, but really it would all lead back to the same main point. It's fun. And that's what I love to hear, right? We want people to have fun with these games. You and I were talking off air before we started recording the podcast. These video games are toys, Andrew, right? At the end of the day, the whole point of a toy is to have fun with it.
Yeah,
right?
Be enjoyed.
So, right, we don't want people getting frustrated on the sticks. We don't want people getting frustrated with the game in general, etc. We want you to have fun. So I love that he's having fun with the game.
That is what it's all about. And he brought that up in the Discord, brought that up in his comment on last week's show that we read out, that he wants to have fun with the game. That is the right approach. And look, if you do feel it's the best game ever, either now or in the future, that is a valid opinion to have, if that is how you genuinely feel. It's the shills that are saying it's the best game ever 2 days in and saying that anybody who has any criticisms is wrong. That's what we will push back against. But it's not necessarily about ranking it and saying this is definitively the best and you're wrong if you say otherwise. It's, I'm enjoying this game. I'm having fun with it. That's what's important.
Exactly. And Bob225 on Discord also stated, his thoughts, and they were similar. He states, it turned out to be a pretty good game. I was hating before it came out, thought it was not going to be worth buying, or it was going to be the same as last year. And Cavs4872 stated, bonkers release week. I guess 2K25 is actually good. And I also love platformers, and PS5's Astro Bot is becoming the highest rated game of the year. So he's excited about a bunch of different releases. But do you see what he said there? He goes, I guess 2K25 is actually good. He hasn't played 2K25, but he's seeing that it's getting more positive reception. That matters, right? And the fact that it is getting more positive reception means that they did more right things. They did more positive things with this release that gamers like, as opposed to 2K24. So it appears that they could be moving in the right direction.
And to Bob's point, there's something to be said for healthy skepticism, maybe a little bit of cynicism, certainly setting the bar low, realizing that you may be disappointed. It certainly sets you up to be delighted by the game when it exceeds those expectations.
Exactly.
And we do have a few more responses from Facebook here. Royce says, I will say I've been surprised by seeing the videos of the gameplay by Derek and others, especially the Fever Mercury game. The videos make me want to play the game, still waiting on my copy to arrive. So Derek, your videos are definitely putting the game in a good light.
That stuff matters, Andrew. That stuff matters in a big way. There's been comments that stated, you've made me buy this game, right? And that's why I think that marketing approach, what they're doing with that pre-release footage, I think that overall it's damaging to the game's sales, and whether there's a competitor in the space or not. I think that they need to have somebody on the sticks that knows what they're doing with the game and knows hoop, etc., in order to show this game in the right light, in order to get people pumped up about it.
And you notice that it's saying that you're making me buy this game after seeing how much fun you're having with it and seeing that the game can be enjoyable, can look good and feel good and play well. It's not just because you, as a content creator, Derek, have said, you must go out and buy this game. This will be the best game ever. Trust me, You are showing, not telling.
I didn't even have to say anything. Right. In fact, I've been incredibly critical of the series since 2K18. And, he listens to the podcast and whatnot. I didn't have to say that I was having fun. You can see it in the footage, right? You can see the way I'm executing moves and the things that I'm doing on the court. It makes you want to play the game and do that stuff. So, yeah, I appreciate the compliment, Royce. That means a lot.
Speaking of which, Kieran, fellow Aussie of course, shout out to you down there in Victoria, says, as a mainly offline player, I'm waiting it out for a while. I've seen some really scathing comments about my team saying that offline play has been nerfed in a big way. Also that MT is a lot harder to come by, so what they've given with one hand by returning the auction house, they've taken with the other. Derek's PC gameplay looks smooth as, maybe I'll go back to PC this year. But I'm waiting out for more gameplay reactions before jumping in. With my team off the table for me, I look forward to getting back to full season play in my league or my NBA eras, if they are any good. Eagerly awaiting the next pod. Thank you, Kieran.
Well, thank you for the compliment again on the gameplay. I also want to point out that that's one of the strengths of 2K is that there's so much content, right? Like there's modes that he wants to stay away from, but he knows that if he likes the gameplay that he can get fully immersed in all of that offline content, right? My NBA eras, WNBA, Play Now, My NBA, all of that. So that's one of the strengths of the series, and it's one of the biggest strengths of the series over the years, is the fact that there's just so much content.
And again, a lot of positive comments on those videos on our Facebook as well. I'll have to send those along to you. And Derek, we don't have the PS4 X1 version, so as we said, we can't comment on it. But Renee says that he does have the PS4 version, says, so far I've played briefly on PS4, noticed a new rebound animation with LeBron and some skating. PS4 version seems almost identical to 2K23. And no surprise there, but as I said, it did deserve a bit more attention during the previous season. I mean, you could say that last gen is going to be the same at this point, that you can take it as read, but still give people who are paying full price for a product something.
Yeah, it just reminds me of what they did with 2K15, 2K16, and 2K17 and 2K18 on the PS3, Xbox 360 gen. They kept pushing out those titles even though they were releasing next-gen Xbox One, PS4 titles, and each one feels almost identical from a gameplay perspective as the next. They were obviously pooling all of their resources into, or at least most of their resources into the Xbox One and PS4 versions. In PS3 and Xbox 360 gamers kind of felt left in the dust. So this really is no different.
But with that being said, that is how we and the community are feeling about NBA 2K25. And like I said, Derek, cautiously positive post-release.
Yeah, I mean, I had my list of cons, but don't forget about the pros list that I had, right? I'm loving pro play. I love the visual appeal of the game and the fact that, overall, I've had fun with my sessions in Play Now and whatnot on various difficulty levels and in very different types of experiences, whether it's against the CPU or co-op with you or against my brothers or with regular teams or with a fantasy draft. So, yeah, my overall impressions of 2K25 are more positive than they were by quite a bit than NBA 2K24. But, overall, I feel like the game could still use quite a bit of polish and reworking as it relates to player movement.
And first impressions are important, obviously. These are ours. With that being said, first impressions don't always last. This is the honeymoon phase. I will admit that I'm not immune to new game hype, obviously, and especially when I've set my expectations so low with a bit of skepticism and indeed cynicism leading up to the release of 2K25. I've enjoyed my time with the game so far. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months when more issues present themselves, when updates make tuning fixes. Sometimes they're not fixes. Sometimes they cause more problems than they resolve, obviously. So that is something we will continue to comment on. These are our honest impressions, Derek, but I do want to put a disclaimer out there that we do reserve the right to change our minds, and we will explain why. As I said earlier in the show, we'll explain why if we change our minds. We will back that up with reasoning. So these are our honest opinions as of now, but if they do change, don't hold us to them.
Absolutely. And also thank you for supporting the content, supporting the videos that I put up on the NLSC YouTube and, taking part in the mailbag, etc. We really do have a great community.
Absolutely. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, NBA-Live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, NBA-Live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone!